What's up? We're here to talk about America some more. So this time I'm going to explicitly talk about Jean Baudrillard. Baudrillard has some interesting things to say about America. Um, Overall, what else is there to say here in the beginning? I was reading Thomas Paine today. I was struck back and to the left, right? Anyway, I was struck in reading Thomas Paine just about what's the discourse about, right? Like so much of the initial discourse is about, people are not perfect. That's why we need to have government, right? Because people don't have moral virtue, right? If we all would be self-regulating, then we wouldn't need laws to tell us what to do. But we're not good, so that's why we need to have laws, right? So this is part of the story. Also, an important part of the story, Paine is talking about how, like, in the beginning, society happens because um, you know, we can pool our pleasures, right? We can work together, we can do all kinds of things. Whereas, government happens because of our bad things. And so in Thomas Paine's story, right, the good part happens first, right? It's sort of similar to Plato in the story of the Republic, right? There are two cities, right? The first one doesn't have a standing army, right? The first one is just because of the division of labor, basically, which basically just means like, uh, if you get together with people, you can share tasks, right? Even to the point of like you can carry something with somebody else that you couldn't carry by yourself. So literally things can get done that can't get done alone. And then even things that you could do by yourself, right? If you just focus on one type of thing and other people do other things, like if I hunt and you wash the clothes, that'll work out better than if we both try to hunt and wash our own clothes. I mean, it could be that I'm the one who has to wash the clothes, right? But see, again, that already goes to show you, like that tension is always there. And so there are some things where it's like, oh, well, there's circumstance, right? Like in terms of how the bodies are that we're born into and the things that only certain kinds of bodies can do, right? Or again, that's also political because I mean, there's some things like bearing children where, that's one thing. But in terms of like who can do math or, who can make good decisions or whatever, that again becomes political, right? In terms of like, anyway. But, this is all very endemic to the whole discourse of the founding fathers, the whole discourse of, enlightenment, rationalism, and liberalism. While you're thinking about that, think about this, right? So also, like, I think I was listening to Gordon Wood. I think that's his name. I had to go back, of course, and listen to the Goodwill Hunting scene where he's talking about you're going to be back in here quoting Gordon Wood, lol. But anyway, I was listening to Gordon Wood talking about, if you just think about the context of America, right? There weren't any democracies, right? And of course, we can sit here and doubt the extent to which there is democracy in America, right? That's actually very important. And also comes up, it has to, like, Thomas Paine even talks about this, right? I mean, I guess now we're at the point we have to just go read Common Sense together. I didn't make it very far in, so we'll be fine. Let's see here. Okay, so let's go read. Let's go do the founding fathers, right? Okay, so here we are. We're at Common Sense, right? Um, First of all, like this is something. The cause of America is in a great measure the cause of all mankind. So this is, the statement of, we are. It's, a master signifier. We are everything. This is absolute exploit. This is something that I talk about, building off of Thorstein Veblen's concept of exploit, which is where basically you're converting, like, other people have their ideas of what they're doing and you're converting their energy into something that feeds your project, just through your engagement. So basically this is a form of that because it's all well and good to actually be so high-minded and loving. Like Jesus is also very similar, right? And Judaism, right? So I mean the comparison of America to Israel, to Canaan, to the promised land, right? And to Americans as Israelites, right? That is, a core comparison that's often been made. And so this promised land, right? The new world, right? Like there's a lot to that. Many circumstances have and will arise which are not local but universal, and through which the principles of all lovers of mankind are affected, and in the event of which their affections are interested. So, like, universal, the laying of a country desolate with fire and sword, declaring war against the natural rights of all mankind, and extirpating the defenders thereof from the face of the earth, is the concern of every man to whom nature hath given the power of feeling, of which class, regardless of party censure, is the author. So basically, every man. I mean, the thing is, like, the terms in which this is stated are highly problematic, right? I mean, we don't believe in war, we don't believe in nature, we don't believe in rights, we don't believe in man. Yeah, we don't. Yeah, we don't believe in man or nature or power, right? So it's like, or universality, right? But in terms of like what is being gestured toward, like you have to read this in Dhamma language, right? To in order to anyway. But also it's obvious, right? Like killing people, right? And mistreating them, right? And anybody who talks against you is destroyed, right? That should concern everyone. And so this is a big part of my point when it comes to the Hobbesian trap, and as I've discussed with the Atlanta City Council, right? Like, and it's also a huge quibble with Marxism, and actually, gets into, I guess you'd call it liberal economics or something. But I don't think I'm actually able to be a liberal because I don't believe in property. Like, I don't think that people actually own anything. And I think Thomas Paine says something similar, apparently, and maybe in The American Crisis, where it's basically like, we only own things because other people agree, right? So without society, we are not only are we not able to, amass wealth, like people who are rich didn't just like do all that. They organized other people doing things, right? Or like whatever, they somehow got their cut of it. Anyway, the point is like, also, like, you can't defend what you have if you're by yourself, right? Like Elon Musk, right? Without, military protection and like, protection from physical force, right? Like would not be able to hold on to, or whoever, right? So for me, in this sense, like there's no property because it's not the property of a person. And then you could have, the property, it's like, oh, well, all the rich people together are guaranteeing each other's property. But that's where, again, like they don't do it by themselves, right? They need other people. And so that's where it's like, I think it's awkward for people because it's like, yeah, in some sense there is, class collaboration going on. Like people like, I mean, what do you think that we're doing when we go shop at the supermarket, right? Like we are lining somebody's pockets, right? There's no getting around that, right? And so, what I do appreciate is that, is talking about things in this very bird's eye view way. At the same time, right, like, again, the terms in which these sorts of writings are done, like, are inadequate, right? They are delusional, right? So, I mean, talking about the natural rights of all mankind while everybody involved is a slave owner, like you have no recourse, right? If you're going to sit there and whip and rape and traffic and kill people, then like nobody is obligated to do anything for you, right? Like if you are drawn and quartered, you can expect no better, right? Like it's I'm thinking of the song Kill V Maim by Grimes, where she says, you gave up being good when you declared a state of war, right? So in Thomas Paine is saying that against, Britain or whatever. But this is like the American Revolution is really like, it's the apex of like, or it's in a way, it's the smallest of distinctions, right? Because it's white men on both sides, right? Like in terms of like pitting a struggle, like the civil rights movement is like black Americans and white Americans or something, right? And then I guess the Civil War is also a good example of this. But, Civil War is like slavery, non-slavery, or like feminism, men and women. Yeah, I mean, they're all obviously really great sorts of conflicts and worthy of discussion. But the point is, like, the American Revolution, like, there's definitely a case to be made that, the founding fathers or whatever are like on the side of the marginalized in general. And so that it's basically a good thing that the American Revolution happened, even from the standpoint of you just think about how powerful Britain would be if like America, like the colonies had just stayed a part of Britain and Britain basically just controlled all of North America. Like that Who knows? But of course, like America basically controls all of North America, and America is like now a big problem, right? Like if you look at public opinion, right, of like who's the biggest danger. I don't even know what this is. The US. Okay. This is why 34 countries, like, yeah, there's more than 34 countries in the world. Like, that's so silly. Oh, is this from a long time ago, though? Oh, great. Oh, this is the same 34 people. Whatever. Oh, but they do at least have, like, Ghana in there or whatever. Okay, so yeah, where's Ghana? Oh, Ghana likes us. Okay. Anyway, what's the point here? I forget. Oh, the point was that basically there are people around the world who are afraid of America, right? Like America is the most powerful. If you look at UFOs, if UFOs belong to anybody, they're probably somebody in America, right? I mean, the idea that, China or something is able to leapfrog America in terms of technology already, like, doesn't seem that plausible, right? Because, I mean, the first mover advantage is so great, right? Like, America was so far ahead. I mean, so far ahead, right? It's so mysterious what was going on in the 40s when it comes to science, right? So, I mean, it's mysterious. But the point is, like, it's easy now to feel the way about the United States the way Thomas Paine feels about the United Kingdom, right? So that's where I wanted to bring in. Let's see. Oh, right. He says something about subtle. Right. The prejudice of Englishmen in favor of their own government by king, lords, and commons arises as much or more from national pride than reason. Okay, so Thomas Paine thinks like, if you're really smart, right, if you're doing a good job, right, like you're just going to believe everything you believe because of reason or something. And of course, he said before, right, time makes more converts than reason, right? That's like one of these first things. Oh, it must be even higher. Right? End of the first one. Time makes more converts than reason. So, I mean, he's talking about the limitations of reason in the first paragraph, and yet, like, Thomas Paine, this is this Enlightenment rationalism, basically. Like, and so what do I mean by that? It's basically this naive, just belief in like logic and that we're just going to figure everything out. The problem is like your state of mind can be as ordered as you want, but there's still complexity in the world. So like it could be very well be that, equations can do so much to describe chaos and everything, but in terms of like the understanding of that and then integrating it into how you're actually making decisions, like it can't be done in real time, and so you're going to have to use these heuristic shortcuts. And I forget what the point of that was, but this paragraph is basically about like my supposition that you can read democracy in general as a psyop, right? Which is the hyper cynical version. Like basically, if you're gonna be cynical, you might as well go ahead and be cynical, right? Which is to say, like, there's a part of me which is infinitely more cynical than your Thomas Hobbes, right? Your Carl Schmitt, right? Your Machiavelli, right? Your who else is there? Hobbes. Oh, Agamben, right? I mean, oh my goodness, like Agamben sounds to me like Thomas Paine, right? If you look at the state of exception PDF, I might be able to figure this out. Yeah, so we have state of exception. I actually have this in paper copy. But like, like Carl Schmitt is like in a way totally nostalgic, right? That like there shouldn't be this like exceptional decree and there needs like law, civil war, insurrection. basically like just in the times where you see Agamben like talk about people doing things wrong and like what they're an affront to. But still, I mean, these guys are interesting. I like the cynicism. You're basically seeing the social construction of the law, and that's also in Chesterton, right? And Zizek talks about this in certainly the introduction to Mao's On Contradiction, right? But he's talking about how like Chesterton appreciates the anarchy. Basically, like there's a huge homology, right, between the police and the gangsters, right? Like because the police are gangsters, which is not to say that, you know, everything just is corrupt. I mean, in a way it is, but it's like, but it's not to be denouncing, right? Like the point of what I'm saying is not that anybody's doing anything wrong. The point of everything that I do is basically to try and like be an inspiration. Like my idea is basically like in a deadlock, everybody needs to reconsider their point of view. So I will make the first move. I'm not going to reconsider my point of view to take on your point of view because, I mean, girl, you live like this, like, you know, but like, I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to keep moving along the frontier, right? And that's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, this is a reframing of something I've thought about a long time. Like there's a tension between wanting to be different than other people and wanting belonging, but they are unified in the sense that like true belonging only happens in beloved community. And so like the question is that possible with others or not? And what frame of mind or worldview or, you know, what is there to say about, you know, being ready or readying our readiness for beloved community, right? Because if you're talking about, you know, your city on the hill, you know, you're talking about, gosh darn, you know, we're going to be a model for all mankind. Our cause is the cause of all mankind, right? If you're going to be talking like that, like I appeal to you to like John Lennon is actually, I need to calm down, but you know, John Lennon is making comments that are relevant to, you know, the criticism here, like could be talking and, you know, improving, you know, basically talking to the founding fathers, right? Because it's like you say it, you tell me it's the institution, we'd all love to change your head, right? You better free your mind instead. But of course, John Lennon is still limited. I mean, mind, it's sort of similar in German, right? Mind is Geist. So, I mean, screw emotion, right? We're already to like the level of ghosts and spirits and, you know, the spiritual realm, and the sacred, right? In terms of the double meaning of what there is with Geist. But then it's like, but I mean, you can also refer to your head that fell out of my head type of thing. But anyway, the point is, you know, Thomas Paine is sitting here complaining about, you know, England, right? Which is like all well and good, right? Absolutely. This is where, like, for me, there's something important about natural law. Put it that way. Like, of course, there's no such thing as nature, right? And in terms of natural order, like natural order is beyond order, right? Which is, again, gets back into figurative language, gets back into basically the nature of God and the nature of being and the nature of like why there is anything at all, right? And so that's obviously a mystery. Then we have great mystery from the Lakota people who are also Americans, right? The original Americans. And then you can talk about, well, they called it Turtle Island. Anyway, point is, you know, Thomas Paine is sitting here like debating, you know, sitting here treating you like Jerry, sitting and debating you, as opposed to, you know, like obviously like in a political crisis, you know, there's exigencies, right? There's important things. And of course, the idea of civic virtue and the idea of being a good citizen is something people were talking about at this time. But, you know, reminds me of a line that I have in Finally Here to See You, where I'm like, yeah, Napoleon read, Josephine is the woman that Napoleon read the sorrows of young Werther for so many times, but maybe not enough, right? So it's like, yeah, you're reflecting on civic virtue, but again, like, basically, if you want to look at it in purely amoral terms, like the Hobbesian trap dynamics in a society where there's slavery, like, it's not that slavery is wrong, right? That's not the point. The point is that there are easily predictable, right, lapses in investment, right? Like if you enslave people, like the fundamental thing you have to understand is that like part of the charm of slavery, and like I'm sorry for saying it that way, but like part of what is going on with slavery or domination, right? Because, you know, people dominating their partners or bosses dominating their, like, there's homologies here. I'm not saying it's the same, but like the thing is that people are radically free. Look at Sartre, right? And so bad faith arises when people, and you could talk about it as learned helplessness. You're confusing yourself for your social mask. You are, I'm sure there's a lot of different like ways to talk about this, many of which I'm just ignorant of. But so the point is, like, you become limited. And so you have great potential. So you could think about it like random things happen to people every day. And then all of a sudden, like, it's to the point, right? Genes are expressed, right? That weren't expressed before, right? Like there's even down to the level of that, biological encoding of our bodies, right? There is we have stories, right? We have things to point at that speak of the fact that we're more complicated than we understand. We have potentials that we don't understand, etc. And so like slavery, right, is of course like an example of uniformity. Slavery is of course obedience, and it involves the conceit, right, the conceit that we can articulate our desire or like some aspect of our internal world to the outside. So basically saying like, I want money, so I want to sell a bunch of wheat or rice or tobacco or whatever. And so I don't want to do the farming, so then I want to go like buy slaves, right? And like trainers or whatever, right? And like, what's the point here? Ultimately, the point is like, this is a very obvious like point, right? That there's hypocrisy going on with the American Revolution or something. If you're going to talk about the natural rights of all mankind, right? Okay, so this is the thing, right? Because there will be people who will sit here and say, right, well, it's simple. Black people are not in mankind, right? So again, I feel sorry, like I feel bad, or it's a sensitive topic to even bring up. But yeah, there are some people who think nothing, right? It's not even like they sit here haranguing like, oh, I hate to write people off. There's people who love to write people off, and they're extremely happy to simply say, right, that like, oh, well, those people are not part of my moral community, and so they are simply allowed to die at best. Like, we're indifferent at best, right? The type of thing in Hateful Eight, where it's like we had neither the time nor the inclination, right? Like, which is basically to say, like, I'm not gonna piss on you even if you're on fire, and like, but even to the maximum point of like, I'm setting you on fire, right? Laying a country desolate with fire and sword, right? So if you think about, like, I mean, there's an asymmetry, right? For example, to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, like August 7th, there are some people who celebrate August 7th or something, or October 7th, and it's like, that's also a laying waste with fire and sword. But in terms of then what is done, right? Because it's not even just like, I've talked about this before, that Israel will sit there and say like, we're being held to a standard that, nobody else is being held to. And I think America will say the same thing. But again, it's like, but so often like our rhetoric, but again, this applies to other people as well. But like, we talk about our rhetoric and like the things going on with us as though like they're consequential for everyone, right? Like, our cause is the cause of all mankind, right? And Israel will stand there and be like, oh, well, it's so important to protect us because we're democratic or whatever. In the meantime, like, what is your democracy, right? It is bombing people. It is dropping explosions that destroy people's bodies, like with concussive force and fire, right? And like, literally, it's to the point like America names missiles Hellfire missiles. Like, we have Hellfire missiles and Tomahawk missiles, and it's like, wow. It's just like, that is very on the nose, right? Because Tomahawk, right, is basically, it's the weapon of the indigenous people that we, drove off their land. We killed a bunch of, right, that we culturally assimilated, destroyed their connection to their past, and to their language. And now we're going to name missiles after the indigenous, like the original Americans, right? And then we're going to use them to kill people that don't deserve it, right? And so it's like, okay. And then I don't know, some people do deserve it or something. Anyway, the point is not even to condemn anything that's happened, right? The point is not to like act like, oh, that shouldn't have been done. It's just to point out to you, like, yeah, this is all here. And the point is, like, again, going back to like the simple Hobbesian trap reading, like, you forget about symbolic exchange and whatever, like, and poetic justice, doesn't matter. The point is, like, if you have a society which is founded on this idea, actually, this is what I was getting to, right? So as I was saying, people will be happy to just be like, oh, well, Black people aren't people, right? But the thing is, there's a cognitive dissonance, right? It's like, you understand, like, people can become impregnated or become pregnant, across whatever line that you're talking about. And that people have, I mean, it's interesting. You could call it reasoning, right? People have these same sort of wheels, right? In their head or in their heart or whatever, right? Like the thing is, like, there is so much in common, right? To the point that, like, human babies or whatever, things of our kind, right? Depending on where you grow up, you can learn any language, right? That's not hard coded into us. Like, so like those sorts of things obviously belie the point that anybody is outside of all mankind. But so if everybody's part of mankind, and again, womankind, whatever, like forget men and women, right? In Jesus Christ, there are no men and women, right? So like, among all sentient beings, right? If all sentient beings have this radical equality in terms of like their claim to dignity or whatever, to be treated properly, right? And obviously it gets more complicated with sentient beings, even down to like, well, we can't stop our immune systems from killing bacteria, right? Like imagine the tribunal at the end of time where the germs come back to life and try to hold us accountable for our immune systems, right? And that's where, again, we're going to devolve into subsidiarity. And like, we're going to be like, well, you have to take it up with my immune system cells because I wasn't doing that, right? And then the immune system is going to go on trial, bro. Anyway, the point is, like, there's obvious hypocrisy if you say like, oh, black people aren't people, but then it's like, well, don't teach them to read. It's like, well, if people are so inferior, right, why wouldn't you teach them, right? Like if they could never hope to like defeat you, right? Like why do you care what they know? And that's because you know very well that they're not inferior, right? You know perfectly well, especially the types of people who can think about this often are able to process that things happen over a long time, right? So they're similar to like there were feminists that were like, yeah, women are stupid, you don't let us go to fucking school, right? So if you don't teach people anything, how do you expect them to know anything, right? But so again, it's possible to see it. It's not just a matter, right, for our generation. It's not just like in order to say something, I have to sit here and be like, we can, I can take whatever, like any kind of person and make them into some other kind of person. And it's like, that's not the point. The point is not like, for example, like in the 1800s, like, are you going to be able to, I mean, you could adopt somebody, right? You could adopt somebody from infancy and like we would have been able to have a black person who was ready to be president, right? Not to say that a black person like would be elected president or something, but it's also why they like a black person in the 19th century would not be raised such that, I mean, again, you could also say there were probably a lot of people who would be fine presidents, but in terms of like, like what is considered to be part of that, right? Like being raised in the milieu and so on and so forth. Like there weren't black people or women, right, for that matter, who were exposed, right, to the power circles and to the education. Anyway. But the point is, yeah, this hypocrisy, you know very well that people are people, right? But you act like people are not, right? So the point is, like, that's part of the pleasure which accrues to slavery or even to emotional abuse, right? Where you walk all over people and you just like make them take it, or don't make them take it, right? But you challenge people, right, to set a boundary, right? You challenge people to assume a cost in order to like, that is like, that's why there are no rights, right? There is no right to whatever. Like the point is, if you don't defend like your claim as to how you should be treated or what you will accept, then, there's no, you're like Dred Scott, right? There's no right that you have that anybody has to respect if you don't enforce it, basically. And so now we're circling back around to Callicles very quickly here, right? And the right of the stronger. But that's really no problem because like the point is to understand what does it require to have strength. And again, we're back to the Republic and Plato making reference to, Plato saying that, justice occurs because of sleep, right? It's like you can be as strong as you want. You can lift all the weights that you want. You can be some Arnold Schwarzenegger looking mother flower, right? Go for it. But the point is that like you're going to have to fall asleep. And somebody who weighs 70 pounds can come up and stab you in the head and you're going to be dead, right? Not that everybody who dies, that is. Anyway, like it's possible, right? And it doesn't matter, how big and strong you are. So strength in that sense of resolution, in the sense of, a force that does not easily give way, that must have, and it requires, right, multiple people. Like you at least need a few people, because it's like, yeah, we can take, on and off shifts and stagger our sleeping, but still, like, it's not just a question of sleep, because how are you going to actually defend the other person while they're asleep if you're just one person and then two people come, like, so that's why we have political organizations, and that's why they're not different than gangs, because ultimately they come down to people who don't want to die, and so they're banding together with other people to like not die. But the whole conceit of that is that like there's a common enemy, right? That there are threats that people need to face together. But then, as pain dissimulates, right? I guess I can show you. That's not where it was. Yeah, I mean, society promotes our happiness positively by uniting our affections. Oh, yeah. No. See, this is actually great. I just agree with this. Society in every state is a blessing, and you're going to call me like Rousseau or something. But society in every state is a blessing, but government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil. So this is cool because it's like, okay, government is evil, but it's necessary, which is back to love your enemies, right? And so like you even have like regular Americans, right? They hate the government. They want limited government. It's like, okay, but you have to like civic virtue means taking responsibility for actually addressing the nuts and bolts of the question of how much government is necessary. And like it's all well and good to say that like we want limited government. That can go all the way to anarchy, right? And of course, anarchy is already the case. Go read, structural realism. The point is, like, gosh darn, like you have to take responsibility for the government being limited. Like the government is limited because like it's not even self-regulation, because this is okay. So I wanted to talk about Baudrillard, so I guess we might as well start talking about Baudrillard. Like this is what he's talking about with domination and hegemony, right? So hegemony really corresponds to you swallowing your receiver, and now you are the cop inside your head, right? So domination of hegemony, blah blah blah, right? Like hegemony can only be inverted or reversed from the inside. So I mean that's fine. Like we can say yes, now there's hegemony, but like inverted or reversed from the inside. Again, here this is look, this is no, I thought he would say involution. It'd be fun if he did say it somewhere. Involuntary inversion. It's so sad. But anyway, this is also funny. There's no greater masquerade than this global panic, than the sacred union in panic. The international community becomes hectic and epileptic from the virus of terror and the terror of viruses. Terror is multiplied by the grotesque profusion of security measures that end up causing perverse autoimmune effects. The antibodies turn against the body and cause more damage than the virus. Without real solidarity between nations, the specter of absolute evil must be raised up as an ersatz universal, an emergency solution to symbolic misery. Sing along to a hymn called Misery, Faith in Misery, by the way. When universal contracts and when in symbolic pacts, the universal and the particular no longer function, a form like a conspiracy takes brutal shape, a plot in which everyone is involuntarily involved. Partaking in the conspiracy is not based on anything, on any value other than delirious self-defense in response to the total loss of the imaginary's immunity. In fact, the virus is a cosa mentale. Let's see what that means. But what does it mean? Oh, mental thing. Hey, that worked really good. Oh, wow. Okay, mental thing. So wait, what are we talking about? The virus is a mental thing, and contamination happens so quickly because the mental immunity, the symbolic defenses, are long lost. A panic space can take hold in this. Like, so if you're thinking about this, for me, what I'm thinking about is like the kind of thing where it's like, oh, I'm not phased. Like, think about like somebody, like people have been made fun of or mocked, and they literally didn't care, right? And they were just like, whatever, and they forgot about it, right? Whereas there's other people where it's like someone says one little thing, and then you fly off the handle, you fucking kill them, right? Like people have died over slight insults, whereas other people have forgotten about somebody really trying to hurt them, like the next day. They're just like, I don't care, right? But so that's not to say like we should just not care about things. What I'm trying to say is like this sort of padding, that's what I am thinking of when I think of symbolic defenses. Like it's not really being a fortress, like because I think about, I always want to say guru, but I'm thinking like Buddha Dasa, like the idea of the sage, right? The sage, right, doesn't like get mad, right? The sage is not like taking things personally. But the thing is, like, part of it is that the sage has great acceptance. Like the saint is also like the sage. It's like the guy who's like, turn me over, boys, I'm done. While, you're being burned alive, right? Like being able, like you have the same mental attitude, like if somebody offers you sex, as if somebody literally like cuts off your arm and, like whatever, you're just like, yeah, you can do that. Like, whatever. Basically Gandhi's mentality where he's like, you can kill me and then you'll have my body. And then it like there's not to just say Gandhi has strong defenses. I mean, you can always question this, right? And probably like from I don't know. I'm thinking about like in the movie Inception. Like there's the mental game, right, between like trying to get into the mind and then trying to keep people out. And probably for whatever defense you try to do, your Maginot line, there's a way to get around it, right? But there again, we open up onto the question of logical orders and types. In addition to something extremely qualitative, in the sense of like what does it take, what will get to you, in the sense of the Joker, right, where one bad day, blah blah blah. But yeah, but what particular kind of bad day, Mr. Joker, right? Like it's not just like, oh, put people under stress, whatever. Anyway, this keeps going. A panic space can take hold in this liquidation, one to which the entire global information system also belongs for another reason, the system of networks and instant diffusion, a non-Euclidean space where all rational, preventative, prophylactic countermeasures are almost automatically turned against themselves through their own excesses. Security is the best medium for terror. So, I mean, I don't pretend to be able to like look out at the world and like understand what's happening and be like, oh, ha ha ha. Like, because the thing is, it can always be a higher order. It's 5D chess or whatever, which doesn't mean that I think, again, like any particular people are doing the 5D chess, but like you could think of it as like a presentation from God or whatever. But the point is, like, you can see this, like, for example, like the things where people are like, oh, Luigi Mangione is a bad guy. Like in a way, all you do by, trying to like, this is a prophylactic countermeasure, right? You don't want people to like go around killing CEOs. So you try to talk about how it's so bad to kill CEOs. And in a way, it just makes people disagree with you more, right? They don't like you anymore. Like, but again, it's not to say that it's just so simple. Who knows what's at stake and what's going on with all this? I'm not trying to like offer a definitive interpretation or something like that. The point is just like, there are times when you can understand, right? Or like, you don't want somebody to question their gender identity, but I mean, like, if you call attention to it, like, is that going to work, right? Or even similarly, like, you want people to feel safe in their gender identity, but letting people know about like their options, right, for their gender identity, that might influence them in a way that they think there's nothing is wrong with them because they're not something, right? That it's good to be gender queer and they're not, or whatever, right? Like there's all sorts of ways in like what you're trying to do is like, it's very much this worrying mentality where it's like it's like the helicopter parent, but it's like this overly concerned, right? It's like you are the substance of what you're doing is you're trying to be caring, right? I'm just trying to communicate directly. I'm just trying to let you know. But the problem is like here I am, I'm oversharing, right? Like, or whatever, right? So it's like the idea of, in actuality, like the means is opposed to the end. but there's a certain like psychedelic 21st century version of this that you can see in things like this shooting, or I don't even know, maybe even like, I wonder what it's talking, because I think more and more people are talking about how like pornography normalizes the idea of choking or whatever, and that like, yeah, maybe that shouldn't happen, but like, what does that do, right? Because in terms of eroticism and taboos and things, cultivating the awareness of the taboo only provides more material to then abstract over, right? So it's basically like everybody's probably experienced, like, you're in a toxic emotional relationship and you're expressing it in all of this psychology language, right? So it's like, we can sit here and talk about narcissism and whatever, but we're still basically doing the same thing, right? And we're hurting each other and we're justifying it, and whatever, we're doing all the bad thing. But it's like, it's in a post, there's something about it, it's meta now, right? Because it's like the very substance of the terms of the debate have to do with basically our terms that were used to describe previous debates, right? And so like, this is very much like a feature. So like the fact that like a conversation, for example, the term gaslighting is so core to the discussion of any like, interpersonal dispute, right? Like it's not a mistake. And that's again where people start to say things like, people overuse everything, or, people just call things like that, that they don't like, right? People call anything that they don't like fascism, and it's the kind of thing, I don't know if Baudrillard has a thing like this, but it's basically like, yeah, just because you can see a problem with other people doesn't mean like you don't have that issue. Yeah, so American global power. Okay, so this is one of the key things that is with the election of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and we can be thinking Donald Trump, as governor of California, where politics is only a game of idolatry. We are deep in the masquerade where politics is only a game of idolatry and marketing. It is a giant step toward the end of the system of representation. This is the destiny of contemporary politicians. Those who live by the show will die by the show. So you can think about the Trump assassination attempts. This is true for both citizens and politicians. It is the imminent justice of the media. You want the power of the image, then you will die through its replay, right? So again, you're like, oh, we like, cat videos. It's like, okay, well, somebody's going to make a video of you saying the N-word or whatever. Like somebody's going to do something to you, or like they're going to have video of you shoplifting or whatever, right? It's like, okay, here you go. And then, so obviously, like you looking at porn or you doing whatever you did didn't cause the other thing to happen, but it's like a symbolic thing where it's like you're going along, right? Like you accept it. And so that's a point where at a different time, you're like, oh, I have nothing to do with this. Like BS, right? Like, and like, it's not, you can protect yourself. Like, you don't have to feel bad in front of me, right? Like, I don't get anything out of it, what I'm telling you, but like, yeah, you're going to get got. I love getting got for you. Okay. Anyway, then you will die through its replay. The carnival of the image is also cannibalization through the image. Yeah. So it's like, it's even back to Leela, right? I mean, Leela is a series of representations. Like we're forgetting about ourselves as the absolute in order to experience these images. But like, that's the carnival of the image as well. Like there is no image otherwise. There's nothing appears except in situations like this. But at the same time, like, so that means anything that appears, right, that you like, oh, history, justice, whatever, reason, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I stopped sharing my screen. But, anything like this is also flawed. So again, back to democracy as a psyop, right? It's not possible to have this like perfectly transparent thing where, everybody is just free and they know they're free, right? It's sort of like, if you're free, you can't know you're free. And if you think you're free, like you're not free. Because the defining freedom in such a way that you would know that you're free speaks of unfreedom. Anyway, one should not conclude too hastily that the degradation of American political practices is a decline in power. Behind this masquerade, there is a vast political strategy, certainly not deliberate. It would require too much intelligence. I mean, this is the kind of thing where it's like, ha, 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 whatever. that belies our eternal democratic illusions. By electing Schwarzenegger, or in Bush's rigged election in 2000, in this bewildering parody of all systems of representation, America took revenge for the disdain of which it is the object. In this way, it proved its imaginary power because no one can equal it in its headlong course into the democratic masquerade, into the nihilist enterprise of liquidating value and a more total simulation than even in the areas of finance and weapons. America has a long head start. This extreme empirical and technical form of mockery and the profanation of values, this radical obscenity and total impiety of a people, otherwise known as quote unquote religious, this is what fascinates everyone. This is what we enjoy even through rejection and sarcasm. This phenomenal vulgarity, a political televisual universe brought to the 0 degree of culture. It is also the secret of global hegemony. I say it without irony, even with admiration. This is how America, through radical simulation, dominates the rest of the world. It serves as a model while taking its revenge on the rest of the world, which is infinitely superior to it in symbolic terms. The challenge of America is the challenge of desperate simulation, of a masquerade it imposes on the rest of the world, including the desperate simulacrum of military power. Carnivalization of power, and that challenge cannot be met. We have neither a finality nor a counter-finality that can oppose it. In its hegemonic function, power is a virtual configuration that metabolizes any element to serve its own purposes. Again, absolute exploit. It could be made, but also, in my opinion, there are forms of absolute exploit which are not possible for power. Power is only the conceit of power is only is partial, right? Anyway, it could be made of countless intelligent particles, but its opaque structure would not change. It is like a body that changes its cells constantly while remaining the same. Soon, every molecule of the American nation will have come from somewhere else, as if by transfusion. America will be Black, Indian, Hispanic, and Puerto Rican while remaining America. It will be all the more mythically American in that it will no longer be authentically American, and all the more fundamentalist in that it will no longer have a foundation, even though it never had one, since even the founding fathers came from somewhere else. And all the more bigoted in that it will have become, in fact, multiracial and multicultural. And all the more imperialist in that it will be led by the descendants of slaves. That is the subtle and unassailable logic of power. It cannot be changed. So, this is heady stuff. Like, this is like it's like, finally somebody speaks English, right? At least you're saying something that's worthwhile. Like, anyway, but it's the kind of thing where it's like, I would like, maybe it's just like, I've thought about this so much. It's just like, do you get it? Like, do you see what's happening? Anyway, so basically, like, actually profanation and mockery and destroying values is actually a source of power, right? But then he says, the rest of the world is superior to America in symbolic terms. So that's where, like, as because I'm half German too, so it's really awkward to like play German nationalist for World War I or whatever. Be like, the UK was the bad guys. Anyway, but here, as an American, putting on American nationalist hat, right? We don't have to accept, right, that the world is superior to us in symbolic terms. Fuck that shit. Like, I basically want to go to Carnival and Cannibal. I think that's where what I want to reference is coming from. Yeah, where he's saying that a global power may nevertheless constitute a power of defiance, a power of response. That is to say, a symbolic power means for me a drastic revision. So that's where he might be. He's basically rethinking something like this. The challenge of America is the challenge of desperate simulation, of a masquerade it imposes on the rest of the world. Carnivalization of power. We have a counter finality. Okay. This is interesting. A counter nor a counter finality nor a counter finality. Like, what does that even mean? Like, a finality would mean like another awesome discourse. And then a counter finality would mean like some meta discourse, which is talking about why there can't be an awesome why there's not just one awesome discourse or something, which again gets back to my idea that anything that you like, it's the Tao Te Ching, right? It's the space inside that we use. Like, America, whatever the thing you like is, it has to stand in for something that holds space for you as distinct from other people. And so in that sense, like, a certain degree of variety, even if it's considered to be, arbitrary, an aesthetic, right? Actually, that aesthetic variety and our ability to express ourselves as being different than other people, like, that's core to whatever freedom is or whatever, or like whatever you want to call that. Anyway, So yeah, that America is a global challenge. Oh yeah, it's actually at the end of the second part. Yeah, so what's it called? Ventriloquist Evil? Yeah, very, 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 very powerful essay. So it's basically all after here. The basic rule, so we'll just go. The basic rule, which though it comes from the depths of our anthropology, still applies even in our present work, is the role of gift and countergift. If the natural world is given to us, then we must be able to respond to that. Okay, caveat. Like here you have again, Baudrillard just talking about the natural world. Like the part of the reason why I don't write like books or whatever is like you can't just do that. Like Baudrillard, like he's like normalizing the idea of nature in the world, even though he also talks about how nature is fucked up, right, in the mirror of production or whatever. But I mean, this is the kind of thing where it's like, yeah, I mean, Baudrillard's cool and all, but like, you have to keep shit like that in mind, like lexical hygiene, right? And like, it's actually funny, like, it's like being a semantic Nazi, right? It's like, no, these terms need to be exterminated. Like, we should never use the term nature or natural, right? It's only misleading, right? But so that's, I mean, the trajectory, it's sort of like the 9 billion names of God, where the stars are going out. It's like, yeah, you take away words until like there's only divine silence because there's nothing to say, right? And in a sense, nobody's saying anything anyway. This gets back to the idea time's not real. And so like in the sense where time's not passing, what's America then? Interesting questions. Anyway, the basic rule, which though it comes from the depths of our anthropology, still applies even in our present world, is the rule of gift and counter gift. If the natural world is given to us, then we must be able to respond to that. If we cannot, then we have to eliminate the natural world. It is an undertaking of just this kind that the human race has embarked upon, launching itself, particularly in modern times, into ever-increasing abstraction, going so far as to create a hegemonic structure that liberates us totally from the natural order. By this global performance, this technical scheming, this substitution of a controllable universe made by our own hand, we are probably trying to ward off the anxiety produced by everything that has escaped us since the beginning, by what has been given to us without our having anything to give back. We thought we found a way out by wiping the natural world from the map, but on the one hand, this does not settle the symbolic issues at all. The transformation of the world is a technical operation, not a symbolic one, and on the other hand, it is no response. We are just contenting ourselves with liquidating what we cannot respond to. Now, this technical solution has in its excessiveness, and again, this is the final solution. So like, if you're talking about like the philosophy of the Holocaust, the philosophy of National Socialism, and like what its implications are, like, it is very much to say that, this is going on in a diffuse way. Like, because again, this whole idea of like substituting a controlled universe, this is watching YouTube instead of feeling, right? This is like, talking about the same things instead of opening up mysterious avenues of conversation, because that's just too much right now, right? And this is, again, theory of Bloom, very theory of Bloom coded. And so it's like, you're trying to, set up a set piece so that you're again, this is again symbolic defenses. You're insulating yourself from, what's really happening or something. You're trying to. But again, that's very, and then you can talk about Afro-pessimism, the idea of like the projection of ontological nullity or uncertainty onto Black people, and then think about what is contained under the heading anti-Black violence, right? Like the guy with the scars, and like people dying on sugar plantations, and people being raped dozens and hundreds and thousands of times, right? Like people being raped to death, right? People being raped until they have fucking anal fissures, right? Like that's America, right? Like there's no America without that, right? That doesn't make any sense. In a similar way, like, there's no Germany without the Holocaust, right? Like there, and in a way, like this, it's not an accident. The Holocaust is not discrete, right? Like you had World War II and then World War II ended. You had the Holocaust and then it ended. No. Like fundamentally, there is a response to a challenging situation where you just try to destroy it, where it's like you don't know what to say to somebody, so you kill them. Like, and that's an extreme situation or whatever, but like that's happened a million times where it's like you felt embarrassed by somebody, like they're witty, they got you, but you also have them, in a position where you can kill them. And so you do, right? And so it's like, okay, very well, like you killed them, but that doesn't, again, it doesn't resolve the symbolic issue, right? Because, that's where you become a ghost, right? And then you have to haunt the underworld looking for them so you can apologize. Whatever the fuck it is you need to do, or even just the rest of your life, right? No need to get metaphysical, but like, you'll still feel bad about it. It's going to bother you. And then people will be like, oh, damn, I can't believe that. But it's like, yeah, there's a reason why. And because killing people and, destroying things doesn't solve every issue. And so it's not a question of this moral condemnation and like, you should be a good person and you need to be an ally. Like, miss me with that. That's the kind of thing, like moralization, that's the kind of thing that makes people want to be bad in the first place, right? It makes people want to frustrate expectations. So you have to not set expectations. Yeah. So like setting a boundary is not the same as setting expectations. Setting expectations is really just you're not setting expectations on the other person. You're inculcating their expectations for you, right? So it's like, oh, if I do this, they're going to do that. So like, oh, well, like if you're rude to me, I'm just going to walk away. So, I mean, you can be rude to me, but it's like, okay, bye, and then it's like, I'll talk to you when you're not going to be rude, right? Anyway. Now, this technical operation has in its excessiveness ended up producing a world from which human beings are excluded, which is normal since they are themselves natural beings, and created a new situation of basic anxiety at dealing with a world that is totally beyond our grasp. I mean, this is like Baudrillard is just like, he's just whatever. He's in old man mode. He's just like everything's in quotation marks, but he's not saying anything about it. Basically, because it's okay, normal, whatever. Humans are natural, like human beings don't exist, right? And neither does nature. Anyway, created a new basic anxiety. It remains for us to understand what induces the human species, again, there's no such thing as a species, to throw itself into such a performance. But there is nothing, unless we suppose that this is our real response and that this substitution mania is our form of counter gift, our challenge. If this is the case, our entire technical universe, even in its most excessive elements, again, read the Holocaust, read the triangle trade, read the Arab slave trade, read, gosh darn, the Mongols, right? The rape of Nanjing, right? Like when we're talking about its most excessive elements, right? We're talking about, the worst things in the world, right? Think about chronic emotional abuse, people that get raped every day of their lives, right? And the ways in which technology is employed to let, people that are raped every day and they make videos about it, right? Like that happens like every day. That's happening. And more people are masturbating to it anyway. And that's America, right? Pornhub, right? Like where do you think so much of that stuff is made, right? Anyway. Even in its most excessive elements would then assume a high symbolic value as a response to the original gift, the original crime, that is the existence of the world without us, without our having been consulted, in which case, according to this new hypothesis, there would no longer be any reason to submit this whole way the system has developed to the tender mercies of critical thought and negativity. Very well. Yes. Forget critical thought. Forget negativity. I'm not here to sit here and debate you, Jerry, right? Like, that's not the point. The point is not to say that you did anything wrong. Like, it's actually much more interesting than that. But the thing is, everything that you would want to get out of telling people that they did something wrong, you can do in a better way. Basically, in this chipper, DD, entrepreneurial, like, go get them, work harder, right? Work smarter, right? Like, that's where you are aggressively reconceptualizing. You're exploring mental frontiers. You're coming from angles that people aren't expecting, because you're not going to get outworked when it comes to like submitting like your metacognition, right? Which is why like I can sit here like I haven't held a job, right? Whatever. People can be like, whatever. It's like, yeah, well, I've been thinking about stuff, right? And which is not to again say that I have any sort of quality, but like it's easy to overlook the work that goes into metacognition and meta affectation, right? In terms of processing, right, our emotions, right, and refining the quality of our intention. And so it really leads to situations where people do not understand, right? Like it's the kind of thing you can't tell by looking at somebody, right? Like they're in a suit, whatever. Like that person could be so subtle you cannot begin to comprehend or imagine or guess, right? Or they could not. They could just really not be thoughtful at all. That's not to say that like it's an inherent quality either, obviously. Anyway, matters would be settled here too. Now fully realized in excessive form in the zero oneness of the world, the digital imperative that defined every breath of the planet's living billions. Here was the heave of the biosphere, as Don DeLillo writes in Cosmopolis. That being the case, there would no longer be any need to dream of a critical or symbolic alternative. I mean, that's just true, right? Like there is no need for a critical or symbolic alternative. There's not an alternation. Involution is not, moving to an alternative. The point is that what's already happening isn't what you thought it was, which is also why, like, there's no point in being anti-American, which is another thing to say. Like, even people who are just like against America, they consider America to be the big bad, right? So regardless of whether you are before or against America, you agree that America is this important thing that needs to either be supported or opposed, right? Whereas what I'm telling you is that it's like, that's so far beyond the point that if that's what you think, like, you have no civic virtue and like you are not an asset to any collective, much less America, right? And you also are no threat to any collective, right? And you're certainly no threat to America, right? Whatever that should be. Anyway, but right, there's no critical or symbolic alternative. That's not the point. The point is not to condemn, but to save, right? And then, like, it's all well and good, white savior, whatever. Forget about saving, but it's something about soteriology, you're trying to help, not fix. I just saw this on a thing, So it's not save, but it's like, lend a hand. And so in that sense, like they say, Alexander looked out and he saw subjects, right? So you should look out and see people who need help. And if they happen to be billionaires, if they happen to be president of the United States, if they happen to be whatever, mass murdering killing machines, like fundamentally, there's somebody that needs your help. And like, that's what symbolic stakes means. If you think about, somebody who has nothing or somebody who's about to die, trying to help somebody who has everything and who's going to live forever, right? Like, yeah, like it's heavy, right? But these are the sorts of things people accept. And it's the kind of thing where people are like, oh, don't say anything about it. Because there's nothing to say. You and I both know there's nothing more to say. Anyway, it would just be a matter of going on with the destruction, since this is our challenge and the source of our pride, that we've smashed the fundamental symbolic rule and have not just conceived, but brought into being to the very worst degree. But what is the worst in this case? A truly inhuman science fiction universe. No! This is where Baudrillard's completely wrong. Okay. We are going on with the destruction. So Baudrillard is he's very negative about it, but this is accelerationism, right? It's like, we're not fighting the system, right? We are completing the destiny of the system, right? Or whatever, we came to fulfill the law. But here's the thing, right? The people who think that they're lawgivers right now may be under a misapprehension as to the nature of, jurisprudence, right? So for me to come and tell you that, don't worry, like, I'm not here to, I'm not here for an alternative. I'm not trying to change anything. The problem is, my understanding of what is already the case may differ from yours, and you are not going to enjoy the things that I do. And so this is why people are constantly telling me, I need to be more indirect. But that's where I say, forget you, Harold, because like, what's possible there is simply to accept all consequences in an open-ended way. Anyway, but the point is, these things go together. This paragraph, like, in itself, like, points the way to what is about to happen. Because again, it says here, America is bad in symbolic terms, right? So the high symbolic value so there's a symbolic value to a response to the original gift, that is the existence of the world without our having been consulted. Again, here's where Baudrillard's plain wrong. We were consulted in the existence of the world, and there is no world without us. So this is where, we open onto the horizon of the immortal soul, right? And things like Atman is Brahman. And it's like, yeah, I'm serious. Like, I'm serious as a heart attack. Which is basically to say, also, we're squaring the circle here by saying, like, coming over here, no, we haven't, maybe we've smashed the fundamental symbolic rule, but it's like, this is the case because we are going to create the universe ourselves. Right? We are going to create the past, and we're going to create the world, right? We are going to lead to the existence of the world, which is to say, we're going to cause ourselves. And America is an important part of that story. Of course, it's not the only, I shouldn't even say it's not the only part. Like, there's a lot to that story. The dream time is part of that story. Sedna is part of that story. You're part of that story. Every little nook and cranny of everything is part of the story of apokatastasis. and, you know, the world to come, which is, you know, meet the new world, same as the old world, right? Like, hello. And then it's like, oh, we'll never be fooled again. It's like, yeah, well, you're going to do the memory wipe again. Anyway, so it's very much the egg-coded transmigration of souls. But like in this sense, like I don't really care about karma. It's like, sure, like what we do conditions what happens next. But like, yeah, all possibilities are actualized. And so like, yeah, your life is just one kind of possibility. And you will experience all other possibilities across infinite time and infinite space because we're all God or whatever. And also in another sense, this is not happening, right? So like, you know, you are everywhere all at once or whatever, you know, it's just, it doesn't seem that way because of something that you already chose. And it's also not just that you chose it in the past, you're going to choose it again in the future. And you're going to choose to be here and to think that you're not choosing, right? So like, this is very like, I didn't ask to be born, mom, coded, right? Just the fact that like, you know, it's not fair, right? But that's basically a child's mindset, which is all well and good. But like the deeper realization is to understand that you are creating the world, that you co-created the world and you continue to co-create the world. And also your continued designs like are literally leading to the eternal return and the cyclical nature of time through the deployment of science. Because it's like, yeah, what do you think the laws of physics are? Like they're Easter eggs that we left for ourselves to find to be able to piece all this together. Like, you know, of course there's, yeah. So what I'm saying to you right now is like a truly involved, you know, philosophical system that might sound crazy, but you know, whatever. Anyway, we may, moreover, extend the analysis of this all-encompassing machination to the whole field of simulation. We may take the view that the procession of models and images, the stratagem that erases the boundaries between the true and the false, is itself a form of offensive response to the actual world, the real world, and that all of this is done to escape actuality and reality, to escape the unbearable pretension of the natural world, again, quotates, that preceded us and seeks to force us to recognize that precedence. So, I mean, that's one way of seeing what the world is. I mean, this is putting words in the world's mouth. But anyway, oh, this is also related. I have a topic in the philosophy of history, which is basically like why, under the heading strife is justice, we can basically say that colonialism is just, which is to say that like it's what had to happen, it's what is supposed to happen. Like, because it's, as I was saying, like Thomas Paine is sitting here complaining about like the British government is mean, but then like you can say the same thing about America. But like the indigenous people and colonized people and marginalized people, and not to like be too shitty about it as a white man, but it's like, you know, like the indigenous Australians hunted a bunch of megafauna to extinction, right? It's all well and good. It's like the flower that's like, oh no, how could you hurt me? But then like when the flower is like in a position of power, right? It's raging and it's fucking, you know. And so it's like, yeah, like how are you treating those animals? Like how do you treat, you know, which is basically just to say, like, when people say like they have a right, this has everything to do with rights, because it's like people say you shouldn't act that way, right? Like you don't get to do that. And it's like, okay, well, who's going to stop me? And then it's basically the question of like, how do you behave when you think you can get away with whatever you want? And that again comes down to the quality of intention, because the idea that you need to be checked by other people who are stronger than you, that's a dog shit quality of intention. And like, that's building a house on sand. People are the infrastructure. And so what's being called moral virtue here, which probably we need to reframe, but like, oh yeah. Yeah. For were the impulse of conscience clear, uniform, and irresistibly obeyed, man would need no other lawgiver. But that not being the case, he finds it necessary to surrender up a part of his property to furnish means for the protection of the rest. This is basically a standing army. But okay, how are you going to protect yourself from the standing army? Hello? Like, how are you going to stop it from becoming a military junta? Like, it's the most obvious question in the world. Like, if people don't have moral virtue, why would it be in the government? Like, there's no reason to think that, you know, some other people, just because they're rich or good at war or something, that they're going to be able to do that, right? So, like, ultimately, all this enlightened rationalism and everything is completely incoherent. It doesn't make any freaking sense whatsoever. At the same time, you know, part of what's being expressed here is worthwhile. I think it was Ethan design. Security being the true design and end of government, it unanswerably follows that wherever form thereof appears most likely to ensure it to us with the least expense and greatest benefit is preferable to all others. Right. So the least expense. But then the question is what's necessary, right? And we're back to cruel necessity and necessary evils. So, and then, but again, that's really what Baudrillard is talking about here in terms of hegemony. Does he say internal? Oh, right here. Everything changes with the emancipation of the slave and the internalization of the master by the emancipated slave. Hegemony begins here in the disappearance of the dual personal agonistic domination for the sake of integral reality, the reality of networks, of the virtual and total exchange where there are no longer dominators or dominated. Indeed, it could be said that hegemony brings domination to an end. We, emancipated workers, internalize the global order and its operational setup of which we are the hostages far more than the slaves. Consensus, be it voluntary or involuntary, replaces traditional servitude, which still belongs to the symbolic register of domination. Hegemon brings the one who commands, orders, leads, and governs, and not the one who dominates and exploits. This brings us back, again, government man. This brings us back to the literal meaning of the word cybernetic, kubernetike, the art of governing. Contrary to domination, a hegemony of world power is no longer a dual, personal, or real form of domination, but the domination of network, calculation, integral exchange. So again, going back to democracy, like this is also finance, right? Like what are these people talking about? Like, and what are we still talking about? Like, people think that their freedom means like they make enough money to like buy things that they want. Like, that is so mediated, right? Like, that is going through our second nature, right, of money. But it's like there are more fundamental concerns than money, having to do with weapons, having to do with, the harvest, right? Having to do with our relationship to the natural world, having to do with our reliance on physical laws and matters of like the world that can be tapped into by science, right? Or magic or whatever. They're the same thing, whatever. But so like being concerned with money and mammon, right? That's second nature. Anyway, this is impersonal, right? Or even, Instagram likes, like the idea that you care about likes or some metric that we've been taught to care about. Like that is the mediation. And of course, the meat, the whatever, the shit, the emotional, whatever, the symbolic connection is still there. Like in that sense, there's no change. But, like with democracy, and I'm going to end up here because I want to go to goodwill. But anyway, like with like the whole idea of democracy, like the idea that there were no democracies when America was there, like that sort of makes me feel like, oh yeah, like it plays an important role. It's a catalyst. But then the idea being like, okay, so what are we aiming for? The United States of Earth? Like, should everybody just try to be admitted into the United States of America as a state? But then like we'd have to change our Constitution, or America is just our name for the world, right? But again, at that point, you have to look at the responsibility that's required there. And then, I mean, a lot of people have shirked that, right? They didn't want to go into South America because you don't want to take responsibility for all that. But the thing is, if you want to be a hegemon, if you want to set yourself up on the planet, you have to take responsibility basically for everything. Anyway, but so like, this whole idea of representative government is a psyop, because like what it does is, what's important is not that there's the rule of law. So there is not the rule of law. There has never been a rule of law. Laws, in my opinion, don't exist. I'm a nominalist. What exists are expectations. So the idea of a law is important, because what exists are the expectations of other people that laws will be followed. And then there's like the expectation of people that if they don't go and enforce those laws, something else bad will happen to them or whatever. So anyway, domination can be overthrown from the outside. Hegemony can only be inverted or reversed from the inside. Two different, almost contrary paradigms: the paradigm of revolution, transgression, subversion, domination, and the paradigm of involution, inversion, reversion, and auto-liquidation, hegemony. They're almost exclusive of each other because the mechanisms of revolution, of anti-domination, as history demonstrated, can become the impetus or the vector for hegemony. We could compare hegemony to the brain, which is its biological equivalent. Like the brain, which subordinates every other function, the central computer assumes the hegemonic hold of a global power and can therefore serve as an image of our present political situation. Which again, look at AI. So like the destiny of America has something to do with AI, has something to do with this involution, and it has something to do with squaring this circle, right? On the one hand, you can be triumphalist and be like, oh, we're so great, we're so civilized, we abolished slavery, right? You can bury your head in the sand as to like the violence inherent in the system and so on and so forth. Or you can be anti-American and you can denounce things and, it's so funny because you're basically doing Enlightenment rationalism and you're trying to be against it, right? Because you're setting up these moral absolutes and judging history and whatever. And it's just like, both of these are terrible, like, and they're completely inadequate. They are the type of shit that if you believed that shit on the frontier, you would be dead, right? And you would die of dysentery on the Oregon Trail because, like, those aren't good enough ways of thinking, right? Which is not to say that, they both contain important elements. So drawing from that, yes, like the country, the United States of America, has a unique place in the story of the world. At the same time, it, like, the very nature of that unique place requires the constant reconsideration of America, similar to Judaism, right? Judaism obviously plays a central role in the world. It has a prophecy. And look at what's happening now, right? Judaism does play a crucial role in this crucial time of world affairs. At the same time, right, the very sense in which Judaism plays a special role has everything to do with, the internal work and the reprocessing and the reconsideration and the special role that people who consider themselves to be Jewish are supposed to play, right? It doesn't just happen automatically. You're part of the plan. So you are an agent of destiny. You are a tool of God, right? You're the hand of God, right? And so for God's plan to happen, you have to play the proper role, which is destiny, which is, again, me sitting here. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm not here. It's like, yeah, it's our destiny. It's going to happen, which is also to say, like, it's not what I'm going to say it is, right? It's not that I'm going to set up an expectation and my expectations will be fulfilled, but things are going to go the way they're going to go. And, like, that's a tough cookie for everybody to swallow because, yeah, colonialism happened. It's part of the story of the world. In some sense, it was meant to happen and that it could not have happened. And so, like, at the same time, Nat Turner's slave revolt is the same way. John Brown is the same way, right? Whoever that Charlize Theron lady played in Monster, right? That's the same way, right? So again, similarly to, like, obviously, people who you're enslaving are smart, right? Like, they're just like you, right? In some sense. And so you pretend that they're not. And that's part of the fun, right? That you get them to act like they're stupider than they really are. But, again, you should expect no less, right, than subterfuge. The mirror people are coming for you, right? So the way to escape, the mirror people is not to try and put them in the mirror in the first place. So, which is, again, to, refuse representation, which is, again, part of what America is about in the first place. Like, America is supposed to be like freedom of religion, right? So my religion means, like, yeah, the state doesn't exist. Like, yeah. And so, like, you might be able to talk about it just like things have changed, technological situation has changed. But also ideas have changed. I mean, Thomas Paine is completely inadequate, right? I mean, like, he makes mistakes that even for his time, like, are unforgivable, right? In the sense of, like, clearly beginning from unacceptable premises, right? But at the same time, like, everything is like that, and the last thing that I guess I'll say is, in terms of appreciating America, right? Another thing to say in general is, and this should be to everyone, like, you're not special because of anything that's associated with you, right? Like, I'm not special because I'm white or because I'm American or German or whatever, because I like Jean Baudrillard, right? Jean Baudrillard is special because I like him, right? Right? Like, America is important to me because I'm associated with it, right? So the thing is, like, the things that are important, right, a lot of people are associated with them. So, like, even if you're not from America, maybe you saw the movies, right? Whatever. But so what was the point of that? The point is, like, being important is not about living up to somebody else's expectations. Being important is about, like, appreciating the significance of other things and, like, elaborating on it and embellishing it. I forget where I was going with that, but it has something to do, like, so the destiny of America, we're a catalyst. We're playing a transitional role. Like, we are, at this point, we're technologically far ahead. You're so far behind us, etc. But obviously, the moral development is not there. And that's what there is to do now. Like, to sit around, anybody who sits around and says that, oh, you know, there's a problem with people, if you're complaining about that problem, I just want to know, what are you doing to improve your own moral character? And then listen. And then the thing is, most people aren't smart enough or something. I mean, a lot of people can tell Jordan Peterson's full of shit. But like, in terms of like who actually can talk to you about virtue, I basically say to you, no one. That's why I'm running for president, because there is no public figure that's worth listening to, like in a larger sense. You know, you can go listen to Daniel Schmachtenberger or whatever, or, you know, whatever, and like get some level of subtlety, whatever. But like, in terms of drawing together everything that needs to be done, like, I'm not even capable of doing it all by myself. Like, I'm going to start getting into conversation, but like, that's why I have to do something. Like, it's not just because I want to self-aggrandize or whatever, but it's like the whole point of the fantasy of my self-aggrandizement or something is that like, this is necessary. So similarly to America, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Is America going to impose itself on the world? Like, just get a load of me.